Hi everyone, hope everyone's staying dry this week. Welcome to my week 6 presentation. This week I'll be choosing the U.S. Department of Education for the federal department as my focus. I chose the U.S. Department of Education because I thought maybe it'd be fitting for all of us, especially since a lot of us or majority of us, or all of us are going through some kind of loan or money spent. Either within our undergrad or currently with our graduate degree. It seems like education goes hand in hand with money. And so I'm going to compare and contrast and see, if Department of Education should expand their scope or decrease their scope. So we'll look at some of the pros and cons of expanding or contracting the U.S. Department of Education. Now, growing up during the 80s and 90s, there's still a big change between then and how I see education being run now, at least based off of a local state level. But as we grow, we experience more sort of issues as we, apply for college or try to pay for college, or even look at the different sort of curriculums that are applied even through, from K through 12, right? Whether if seeing that through our kids or, through our relatives, right? We've seen a lot of changes. Personally, we've seen No Child Left Behind policies from the federal government. We have Common Core, and currently we have sort of a STEM, science, technology, education, and math, being sort of pushed through, from either K through 12. Usually it starts around middle school, but they're changing up the curriculum every time, and we've all seen sort of the difficulties, right, when the federal government issues a broad policy. I personally think that the federal government is sort of like a broad brush, right? And some people would tend to agree with that, and feel that, once they pass a policy, it's across the nation, right? And a lot of folks believe that that's sort of that's not a very efficient way, right? Because local needs sort of are different, right? What's needed in California may be different in Virginia, right? The income levels of one area could be different from another, right? And so trying to fit education it's a delicate matter, right? Because different people also learn at different methods, right? And so some would say that, well, you know, keep education local, right? Because the folks on the ground, right, knows what's best because they see it, they go through it every day, just like you and I, right? If we have kids and we see them going through school, we sort of know where they're at, what is needed, and basically work towards how the environment is, right, surrounding them. Now, on the other hand, right, there's sort of I guess you can say, equality in education. I did mention sort of different socioeconomic backgrounds, right? So, you know, what if, you know, uh, in California, for example, you know, uh, they're not focused on a certain segment of the population with education or funding, right? And who's going to be there to sort of protect that among the population, right? Going back to the Constitution, federal government's responsible for upholding everybody's rights, right? Our Bill of Rights, that's sort of the supreme law of the land, right? But what if the states don't follow that? What if the states sort of pick and choose where to fund, in their local areas, right? If they choose to fund a sort of higher class area, right, with better education, and then they, sort of siphon off from, a lower socioeconomic area, how is that fair, right? Then the federal government does step in, and that's what they do currently as part of their responsibility is to ensure equality, right? That everybody gets a fair share of education, no matter what your background is, right? Your social, economic background, your race, your culture, that everything is equal, right? And a lot of times, that, in times like this, it can't be done without financial sort of attachments, right? Everything about the bureaucracy that we've created since the beginning or founding of our nation is sort of, at least in the federal government, is very tied to a budget standpoint, right? We see that in this week's reading on, how rigid that is, right? And if it's coming from the top down, then that doesn't really work. That sort of goes back to the broad brush, right? But when it does come down to maybe social matters of equality, maybe that probably is the thing that needs to be done, right? To force the hands of the states to properly administer education. So coming off from the other slide, where does education fit as far as the federal government goes, right? Should they continue to be a broad brush and expand the scope, or should they decrease? If you ask the population now, or folks around you, you'll probably get the same response like I did, right? You have half and half, depending on what the scenario is. And so, in closing, I think there is a part, right, for the federal government to be a part of the education system. However, it shouldn't be that broad, right? With any compromise, there is sort of a give and take, right? If education is important enough and, everybody wants it done the right way, then, why not allow the states to create the programs, so that they better understand the social needs of their constituents. And, maybe the federal government can sort of be an overwatch, right, of, presenting that equally among the people, and maybe even provide some federal grant assistance, right? But whether or not that's the case, I think some kind of compromise and sort of working together should be the scenario moving forward for education. Well, hope everyone has a good week, and I'll leave you with that, and I'll see you next time.